Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you to those speakers. Thank you. The intent of this notice of motion is to confer greater flexibility to landowners to site detached dual occupancies in areas where attached dual occupancies are currently permitted. I've been surprised at the level of public support that I've received when I told people that I would be bringing this tonight. I'm told that some were turned away when registering as speakers as the slots were filled. I will try and speak for all of you. Colleagues, we have debated at length and ought to know well the advantages of detached dual occupancies. As Mr Myers reminded us, it allows residents to let seniors live nearby to their families, yet with a degree of independence and dignity, sharing in childminding and defraying the costs of living. It allows parents to give young families a way to get a leg up in the property market and to continue to live in the communities in which they grew up and feel some kinship. But here are some more. It allows people on acreage to build to rent and gain a source of income and perhaps stimulate tourism. It is a form of affordable housing as the overhead costs of land purchase are negated. It creates housing under one title and not through subdivision. And if I'm known for anything in my 9 years on council, it's opposing inappropriate subdivision. It continues to act as a source of revenue to council through section 7.12 levies to fund local infrastructure. It raises no new concerns about flood evacuation, and I want to stress this point because attached dual occupancies are already assessed for this risk and are permitted in zones subject to this motion. It acts as a bulwark in areas adjacent to high growth and goes some way to providing a buffer against the pressure for more intensive forms of rezoning and subdivision that we do not want in the Hawkesbury. Many have mentioned to me the unaffordability of housing and the social strain that comes from having to live far from work or family. There is already a large amount of clandestine dual occupancy happening now in the Hawkesbury than many might be comfortable to admit. I can think of half a dozen examples without leaving my home suburb of Oakville. Most have existed for years, based on the Aussie larrikin principle that good neighbours are frequently willing conspirators in thumbing their nose at a bad law. This motion would have the added benefit of regularising those unapproved dual-ocs via a DA. Now, some might ask why I am bringing this as a standalone motion when the LEP process is already underway. I think we need to admit that we have made a mistake. I accepted the promise that was made back in 2018 that reforms like this one would be incorporated into a new LEP that would be completed by 2021. It is now 7 years since we were presented with that timeline and we are still waiting with no end in sight. Back in 2020, the state government introduced changes suggesting councils adjust their LEPs to accept a more generous definition of secondary dwellings and granny flats, nearly doubling them to 110 square metres. I compounded my error when I was urged by people, including our State Member of Parliament, to move immediately to adopt these changes as a dot point reform to our LEP. Instead, I again accepted the suggestion that this would be best incorporated into the new LEP, and we are still waiting. I am bringing this tonight, driven by a belief that smaller changes like this are likely to succeed in being endorsed by the state government, the claimed bottleneck, because they adhere to policies that the state are practically imploring us to legislate to provide more flexibility in housing stock. I believe that our omnibus LEP process is moribund, and I ask my colleagues, if 7 years is not the point at which this chamber decides it has to attempt a different approach, then when will be? Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Again, I can only commend those people who have endured sitting in the gallery for more than 4 hours. I'm sorry that you have to witness the sausage being made and all of the palaver that we have to go through to eliminate one word from a statute. I know it's more complicated than that, but that's the way it feels. I need to disabuse some people of some of the concerns that they held. We try and blame the state government, but the problem is us. Mr. Bucket was pointing out some proof that the problem is us. I think that reforms of this kind, the state government are practically begging us to do. They change the standard instrument. They increase the generosity of the definition of secondary dwellings or granny flats. They issue a mandate that we need to increase our stock and flexibility of housing in the state. It's not their bottleneck. It's not because there are, as Councillor Wheeler says, cumulative impacts to flood evacuation routes. Let me repeat the point that I made earlier. Dual occupancies are already permitted in the zones subject to this proposal. They are already assessed for flood risk. Attached dual occupancies are already permissible in those zones. I'm asking Council and therefore the state government to provide a greater degree of flexibility. 20% of households are multi-generational. 40% of children in their 20s are still living with their parents. This is a social phenomenon. No wonder this has been the subject of such an upswell of support. I've rarely seen it in my time on council because it meets a need. And Michelle was able to tell us what the human and social costs are of our inaction. This isn't dry or dusty or technocratic. It's what happens when we don't meet the community's expectations by putting through sensible changes of this kind. I'd love for the LEP to arrive tomorrow. But again, after 7 years of waiting, I am sceptical. And I think if this succeeds tonight, this foreshadows other attempts to do what Mr. Myers reminded us was that the approach that worked really, really well before we took on this absolutely everything omnibus approach that just seems to become stuck. I'm not suggesting that it's the fault of staff, but nevertheless, we are stuck, and the community's expectation is that we will do something about that. We can't say that this is all too hard. Byron have done this, Cumberland have done this, Parramatta's done this, Penrith, Northern Beaches, Hillshire Council have done this. We're the ones that are behind, and we need to do something about it. So I hope we can get this through. Thank you.